Hey guys, someone called into the Dr. Brown, the guy who claims he's a God's chosen race, and they asked him a question about reparations. Let's listen to his answer.
Is it biblical? Is it a biblical concept that we never rightly paid the slaves for their labor in centuries past in America, and therefore Black Americans today are owed reparations? On the one hand, you can make an argument that if people were mistreated and abused, then there should be a making right of things. That would be a righteous thing to do, obviously, right? So, reparations to descendants of Holocaust victims from Germany and things like that. Uh, the question here would be one: if we were trying to respond in that righteous way and had never done so before, then what would that look like today?
So we're trying to respond in a righteous way, and then we had never done before. What would that look like today? Okay.
Because we don't have those people, we don't have their immediate descendants.
Notice he says we don't have their immediate descendants. So he's saying basically it's recency bias. Because we don't have their immediate descendants, that doesn't mean you can't trace them. He's saying, well, we don't have their immediate descendants. So we can pretend that we can't find them. And thus, if we can pretend we can't find them, there's nothing to be paid out, right?
We have descendants of descendants of descendants of descendants of descendants.
Right, but then there's people who claim to be descendants of descendants of descendants of descendants of Jacob, right? But nobody's a descendant of Esau, but Jacob and Esau were twin brothers. And now all of a sudden, the descendants of descendants of descendants of Jacob happen to be white, and they're doing birthright tours for people who were born all over the world, claiming that they were descendants of what? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob?
Right? That's one thing. A second thing would be who's paying, out of whose pocket is the money coming?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So when Obama gave $38 billion over 10 years to Israel, it came out of our pockets, and it's putting the nation in debt, which means our kids and our kids' kids will be paying for it. Whose pocket is it coming out of? Because I had nothing to do with it.
I'm a child of immigrants. My mother was an immigrant. My grandparents on my father's side were immigrants.
Yeah, America first, right?
So they've got no connection with that past. So how does
Yeah, just like I got no connection to past with the so-called Holocaust. So, okay, what's your point? So I shouldn't be paying, and neither should this country be paying, right? We shouldn't be going in debt and fighting wars for something we had nothing to do with. We helped fight the war, right? Supposedly, the war that happened in Europe amongst Europeans, that war was fought. We had nothing to do with it, but people died in that war, including people who look like me. And so since we've done it, that's it. We've done enough. So that's it, okay? Let's all get along, move along. We know what's wrong. Let's not do that again.
that work out? Those are fair questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
The other hand, you could say America paid its price by giving several 100,000 people that there was a war, and Abraham Lincoln basically said that these we're going to keep shedding blood until we've paid for our crimes and our sins.
Abraham didn't say that. And it's funny his name was Abraham, but Abraham Lincoln did not say that. Abraham Lincoln didn't consider the black man to ever be equal with the white man, right? They need to unify the states for all kinds of reasons, economic reasons. And when America was doing something as a quote unquote union, they needed America to be on the same page, because you can't go around conquering other nations when you're divided and having war within your own country, right? You can't divide and conquer if you're already divided amongst yourselves.
To paraphrase his much better put words. So that argument could be made that, in point of fact, it's not a matter of making a monetary payment today, because Americans fought a bloody civil war, or most.
He's saying that you don't need to pay him. You paid the most you can pay. You paid money. You paid blood. You fought, and he's saying that this war was fought for what? For rights, for equality, right? So he's saying you paid with your blood. That's enough. Does he take that same attitude with World War I, World War II?
Costly ever, with what, over 500,000 Americans dying. This is at a time when the American population was a fraction of what it is today, and that this was.
But black people fought in that war too. So they fought. They were enslaved, and then they end up fighting in that war, and then Abraham Lincoln had a plan. He said, should we send these guys out of the United States? That's something they don't teach you in history books, but it's easily found, doctor. And he did not consider the blacks to be equal.
To bring liberation to the slaves and to set things right. You say, yeah, but what about
Liberation to the slaves. So what was all the segregation in Brown versus Board of Education and all this stuff in the 1960s? And what is this whole thing about Emmett Till and people being hung from trees and all in through the hot summers of the 1940s? Back when they were declaring the Balfour Declaration. What was all the black people? What was this segregation? What was this redlining and all this kind of stuff? Jim Crow. What was all that about then, since they were free?
the years of labor for which there was not proper reparation? Again, it's a fair question to ask in terms of a biblical mentality. And as I would see it, that the right thing to do is to do everything you can to level the playing field, to do everything you can to give equal opportunity.
And that can't be done with money, though. That can't be done with money and getting land, right? That can't be done with. Let's not apply the same standard. That can't be done with money and land. So a war that happens in Europe gives him the right to be here and exclaim that America should support so-called Israel, so-called, and because of what was done to them, according to this lie that they're a race. And so we got to buy into the lie. We all got to believe in the lie. But then our taxpayer dollars, again, $38 billion over 10 years, just Obama, that's just a fraction, guys. That's being paid by you, whether you like it or not. And wars are being fought over there, whether you like it or not. In addition to the bloodshed that happened back in the 1940s, which were more than 6 million, more people died fighting the war than the people that they said died in the camps. He's saying in the case of so-called black people, that's already a price paid. But he's saying in the case of the lie of a chosen race, it's an ongoing thing we must do because it's biblical and it's prophecy and they're God's chosen race.
Not to say, okay, I'm going to hire a black person versus a white person. The white person is totally qualified. The black person is totally unqualified. And I'm going to hire them. And just in a particular...
Notice the example that he gave. The example he gave is the example of his belief system, right? Because he's going to later point out, he's like, no, this is the thing. Well, you shouldn't have to hire a black person who don't even have the same intelligence and qualifications as a so-called white person, right? Notice the example he gave. And then this is what he's thinking, because later on he's going to talk about, well, it's education and crime and this and all this kind of stuff, right?
Particular situation, theoretical situation. I don't think
he's saying theoretical because he's trying to walk it back just a little bit there.
I think that's the right thing to do. I think you have to keep looking at what remains wrong in society, lack of educational opportunity.
He's saying we just need to start with today, folks. Stop harping on the past. Let's concentrate on what's going on today.
Opportunities for black kids in the inner city.
Question: can black kids be Jewish kids?
Reasons that family structure may still be broken down, and try to look at larger questions to see what can we do to level the playing field. To me, that's...
So he just gave a laundry list of things that people basically associate with so-called black people, right? Birth rate, crime, education, blah, blah, blah. Now, let's see, does he talk about that kind of stuff when you're talking about the fake group of... Let's talk about Woody Allen. Let's talk about Epstein. Let's talk about Harvey Weinstein. Let's talk about those. Let's give some examples. Let's give some other examples. Let's talk about Bernie Madoff, right? You want to give examples? Let's get some full examples, right? But I know that race is a lie, and I know that you're not a chosen race, and I know you're not really Jews, so it doesn't offend me. But I'm just pointing out your lies and your hypocrisy.
The ongoing righteous response. And on the one hand, you could easily argue against the concept of systemic racism existing today and saying, look, under our laws, there's equal opportunity.
So on one hand, you can argue against the concept of systemic racism existing. However, Now, this is the doctor now. You can argue against that. The fact that I call myself part of the chosen race proves that racism doesn't exist. And the fact that you, as an American taxpayer, no matter who you are, must give money that goes over and supports the lie of a race-based ethnic state. There's no systematic racism whereby you send money over there, they take a fraction of that money to pay and lobby, quote unquote, your representatives who then vote for more favorable treatment and things that are pro the ethnic state, the race-based state, and the cycle continues. That's not systematic. You can't consider that racism because it just benefits our chosen race and excludes you. That's not racism.
On the other hand, we could say, well, to this day, Black Americans on average make less money than white Americans. Black Americans on average don't have the same educational opportunities as white Americans. Black Americans on average are incarcerated more than white Americans. Black babies are aborted on average more than white babies. So why is that? Why is that?
Let's see, is he going to say it's because the world hates God's chosen people? Is that what is he going to say? Because maybe the world hates God's chosen people and they're the most oppressed, right? The poor of this world, right? Poor in this world, but rich in faith. Is that what is he going to conclude that? Is he going to make that leap? Let's see.
The case. What are the reasons for that? How do we address that? How do we as a community fix that and level things? That's the direction that I believe is the righteous way to go. But it's as much as certain things sound outrageous, I'm always glad to say, let's have a discussion.
So he's saying basically reparations for black people, quote unquote, because he said that's outrageous. That's outrageous, guys. Okay, so he does this thing about reparations, and then a guy comes in and challenges him because he's like, I don't believe in reparations. So this guy calls in, whom I'm assuming to be classified as black. He's quite perturbed.
Sir. So I don't know what world you're in, buddy, but I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So I'm a student of history, and I know that the Jews were involved in the slave trade and a major part of the slave trade.
False.
And you were talking about reparations.
Totally false.
What?
100% false.
Hold on.
Maxwell, that's false.
He said 100% false. Now, in a way, it is 100% false because a Jew is not based on the flesh. A Jew is one inwardly circumcision by the heart and the spirit. A Jew is a person who's a new creature created in God. And the person who's created in God has the righteousness being found in him, having not my own righteousness. The spiritual, quote unquote, children, because the children of the flesh are children of God, and God's a spirit, and those that worship him worship him in spirit. We are the circumcision who worship God in spirit, rejoice in Christ, and have no confidence in the flesh. Flesh and blood cannot please God. Children of the flesh are children of God. So yeah, that new man, that new creature who's a spiritual creature has nothing to do with the filthiness of the flesh, right? Filthiness of the flesh. So the Bible has such a high standard according to the law. It says if you offended one part of the law, you offended all parts of the law. So thusly, I guess we can say we all were involved in some form or fashion, right? Because we're in the country that benefits from enslaving and war profiting other people. So we all are guilty, guys. See, there you go. Now that we're all in the same boat. But he doesn't want to say we're all in the same boat. So how does the good doctor answer?
That's false.
That's true. True.
The Louis Farrakhan books have been demolished, destroyed.
Louis Farrakhan just gathered the information that was written in other books. Louis Farrakhan didn't actually read the books. Some of these books that talk about slavery are actually written in documents that by people who claim themselves to be part of the so-called chosen race.
Destroyed, refuted. Jews played a minor role.
The guy just told him those aren't Farrakhan's books, but of course, Dr. Brown has the mic. He has the volume control, so you're not gonna speak over him.
In the slave trade.
He said they played a minor role.
Jews played a minor role in the slave trade.
Fact.
Those who call themselves Jews played a minor role.
Stop.
Well, I'll tell you what, Maxwell, you want to here's the deal. When you speak ignorance, you embarrass yourself. When you hear, so tell you what.
I posted my source from a Jewish source on your page on Facebook.
Maxwell, the things
Exactly. See, when you buy slaves, you have receipts, guys. I know. You see, here's the thing. When you do stuff in this world, you're transacting this world, since this is a carnal world, it's temporal, things which are seen are temporal. You have receipts. Because you buy a slave, you don't want the slave running off. The slave might run off. You want a receipt. That's my Negro. Nah, don't you be running away. You my Negro. I done bought you fair and square now.
Have been demolished.
This is not a hack job. This is the straight truth for you. Okay, now can you answer my question? Okay, what part do Jewish people have to pay in reparations to black people?
Well, I would say that if you look at black crime on Jews in recent years, which is
Black
much
crime,
higher
this is
than
propaganda. Are you're a Russian bot now? You just spreading lies?
He is a Russian bot. Everybody's a Russian bot. So he's like, well, if you look at the black crime on, see how he just did that? See how he did that, y'all? See how he done did that now? See how he done switched over there? He got real defensive now, didn't he? Now he said y'all had something to do with the slave trade, and what reparations y'all owe us? We paying money. Every American citizens all around the world are paying to support that. At least still paying it. Germany's definitely paying. Germany, Europe, and Americans are paying with blood and money. There's no denying this, guys. You can look it up. It's there to be found. You can find it, right? And so he's saying, if y'all was involved in the slave trade now, then don't y'all owe us a little bit of money? See, when it came to the black folks, he like, basically let bygones. See, blood was shed over this. We tried to right the wrong. It's done now. Let's stop all this insanity now. No matter, this is outrageous claims. It is not outrageous that he claimed that he's a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had a twin brother named Esau. And somehow these guys know whether they're a descendant of, are you of Jacob or are you Esau? They're twin brothers. That's not outrageous. It is not outrageous that all of a sudden the chosen race became white. That's not outrageous. That part's not outrageous. It's not outrageous that in World War II, people died of all different types of people. More than 6 million died fighting that war. But yet here we are in America, having fought that war, still giving money, as if we, who had nothing to do with it, as he said. And then he goes to name, well, the black people being in plight and being poor and all this stuff. So you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. Are you the most persecuted people or not? Because you just named a bunch of statistics and you didn't mention Jews. So the doctor got challenged, and so he said something very dumb and outrageous at the end because he got called out on his Balaam. But let me show you something.
Up the new world and the old world to connect, and for that he changed the course of human history. So Columbus does deserve the fact that he changed the course of human history, but he did it for a very different reason than what we know for.
You mentioned the country of Jamaica, and the Columbus Affair opens in Jamaica. Why? Why is that island so important?
When the Columbus family was cheated out of what they were entitled to, Columbus's daughter-in-law sued King Ferdinand, which is amazing. I didn't know you could sue the king, but you can. And you sue him in an ecclesiastical court. And it was very embarrassing to Ferdinand because he had clearly lied to Columbus, and he would do it. So he asked her, "What can I give you for you to go away?" Now, Columbus is dead at this point. What can I give you to go away? She says, "I want the island of Jamaica. That's all I want. And I want total religious control of that island." And he gave it to them. And the Columbus family ruled Jamaica.
Notice, she said, "I want the island of Jamaica," and this is the Columbus family. And the Columbus family ruled the island of Jamaica. And this was a religious thing. Okay? This is Columbus family. Now, what is Columbus family? What do they consider themselves to be? Let's keep on going.
For 150 years, and they kept the Inquisition off Jamaica. And
so Columbus family ruled for 150 years the island of Jamaica. 150, and kept the Inquisition off the island. What power is being wielded here? Minor role, though. Minor role.
He did that for a reason. There's a reason why they kept them off there.
Because of the Jewish connection?
Yes, definitely. There were
those who say they are, but are not connection.
Flourished in Jamaica for 150 years, and there's still a local legend down in Jamaica that deals with Columbus that I used in the novel.
What is the dynamic in play with Jews and slavery?
Now, by the way, these are Professor Stan Mirvis and Rabbi. So Dr. Brown needs to talk to these guys because they consider themselves to be of the same thing that he claims he is. So he needs to have these guys on the show and argue them down.
In Jamaica.
Yeah. So this is obviously a huge aspect of what I write about, and the reason I write about this so much is because it was a very conspicuous aspect of the wills.
Yeah.
As I was reading the wills,
wow.
you find that.
See, somebody start looking at the will. So you have pride in your flesh. You want to know everything. I want to look up my grandpappy because they done told me to lie that he the chosen race. So you start studying yourself, start studying your so-called heritage. And then you start, there's a will. What's in this will? This is called receipts, Dr. Brown.
That slave populations are being bequeathed en masse, and in that they're being named individually. And also you see a lot of evidence, sometimes very direct and articulate, of concubinage or relationships, sexual relations.
Oh, concubinage and relationships. Oh my goodness. What? But I thought they're talking about the pure blood. But the pure blood. So what does that mean? Is the children half chosen race? You half chosen race, half Gentile now. Half chosen race, half Gentile. Now you're just a quarter chosen race. You're only a quarter God's people. Now you're only a third God's people. We got to stop this miscegenation, y'all.
With women of color, both enslaved and free. And then
notice they're talking about women of color. Now, what do they call themselves? But they're calling the other people women of color. So what do you call these guys who claim that they're Jews? They don't consider themselves women of color or men of color. Listen to the language, guys. It just gives it away.
Incorporating their children to some extent into the family through voluntary inheritance. So that all made me realize that we need to address the issue of Jewish slave ownership. Over time, I've also realized that this has been the subject.
He's like, we need to address it. So somebody sent him out because, people forget the lies because they just covered up. And he's like, did we own slaves? Then he goes and looks at, actually there was that. Oh yeah, we were involved in it. See, and the problem too is now he's going to be like, but we're involved, but no more than anybody else.
Of competing tendencies. One coming from a anti-Jewish position like the Nation of Islam that wanted to make the case that Jews were overly represented in the slave trade and were overly.
See, notice he said that we were overly represented. He's like, no, we weren't overly, but we were involved quite a bit, but we weren't overly represented. In fact,
abusive to slaves, and that's not true. In fact, it's kind of puzzling why Jews weren't more involved in the slave trade, since it was a totally open type of endeavor that had no guilds or protections like that. And Jews owned slaves to the same extent that everybody else did, so there were no particularities. Now this,
which is problematic because you're not really Jews. So what does that say? Right? Look at these two guys. They're not Jews. Jews are spiritual, and the reason Jews is who can lay charge to God's elect is because a true Jew is one who's worship God in spirit, rejoice in Christ, and put no confidence, have no confidence in the flesh. That's the new creature created in Christ. Like Jesus told Nicodemus, you must be born again. My sheep, they never perish. That's why what they're saying makes absolutely no sense. So in essence, what they're doing is he's just revealing, we are just fake. In that way, we can say we weren't heavily involved because what we've done is we've subdivided ourselves from being just, quote unquote, what we classify as white according to the race, as being Jews. But he just admitted, he said, well, people of color, which means he excludes himself from being people of color, which means anything that's not a people of color is typically classified as what? White. So he's trying to have his cake and eat it too.
Stands in contrast to a rival kind of mentality where Jews must have treated their slaves better. Because how could you be sitting at a Passover Seder saying we were once slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt while being served by slaves?
How could you do that? That's called being a hypocrite. But look, we're supposed to believe that these two guys and Dr. Brown could pass for the son of an Egyptian's daughter. That's what we're supposed to believe. These guys can pass for Egyptian. Now do you see why Egypt can't be in Africa, guys?
People did that. Yeah. And so some...
And he said, how could you do this? He's like, But they did.
Scholars reached an apologetic conclusion in the 20th century, saying that Jews manumitted their slaves more readily or treated them better. And I find that no position is really captures the truth.
Well, some people said that, yeah, we did have slaves, but we treated those Negroes better. And he's like, well, look at evidence. That's not true.
So in fact, I crunched the numbers in my wills, and I found that slaves were about 11 times more likely to be bequeathed than they were to be freed by Jews. So it's very
Oh, so he's saying that they were 11. If you claim that you were a Jew, you were 11 times. That's 11,000% more likely to keep the person as a slave than to free them. You're 11 times more likely to say, nah, Negro, you ain't free. I'm passing you on down in the family. Use our property.
Common to actually free manumit slaves. And there are cases of Jewish abuse of slaves. And then there
See, he just talk about double talk. He's like, we were no worse, but we were 11 times more likely to just not free them. 11 times is a lot, guys. If one is 100%, he's saying 11 times. 1100%, I guess I should say. More likely to keep people as slaves. That's not good. And he said, as far as abuse, we actually didn't treat them better either. What happened?
are plenty of cases of manumissions. In one case, he manumits
He says, but there are some cases of manumissions where they did free them.
a Jewish slave owner manumits his quote-unquote mulatto son because
Oh, got that loving, huh? There goes your pure race.
the love and affection
So isn't this something Dr. Brown just says about the crimes committed to black people against Jews? See, that's what Dr. Brown was just bringing up.
he has for him. So there are cases of sort of sentimentality as well. But Jews are like everybody else.
Right.
There are some abusive slave owners, and there are some.
They're like everyone else, but they're the chosen race of God, and we got to give money to them every year and fight wars. Okay? All right, so I just want to point that out, for those who, now you hear this truth, maybe you can, now that you know the truth, I guess it's up to you what you want to do with it. So this lie of a chosen race, look, a Jew is a person who's born again. A Christian and Jew are the same thing. The only reason they tried to make it a race is because, the Bible talks about my kingdom is not of this world, store not for yourselves treasure on earth. Well, when you want to conquer and rule the world, you're going to make it a race because that's something people can see, because you can't see who believe. Like Jesus says, my sheep, I know them, they believe, right? They never perish, children of flesh and children of God. So because they don't really have faith and don't believe, they want the kingdom down here. So they said, well, based on what you're saying, Jesus, all of sin and come short of the glory of God, every man must be born again, like you told Nicodemus. And we can't tell who's believed. And since you're rejecting all of us, we're going to just make ourselves the in group and claim it's a race because we can see that. And that way we can conquer in the name of divide and conquer based on skin color. And we're going to use your name to do it. All right? That's what it's all about. All right. Praise the Lord, through Jesus Christ. Amen.